guys, it's Madison with Higher Vibrations News, and today I'm going to be speaking with Frankie Cote. Frankie is a certified life and health coach, and he's also a #1 best-selling author. Let's give Frankie a call so we can learn more about his secret sauce to success. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing
Pretty
really well,
good.
thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Can't complain.
Good.
Can't
Don't.
complain. So I kind of did a little research on you. So I see that you have kind of traveled a lot of different paths on your journey to peace. So give me a
Yeah.
little background. Tell me some more about that.
Well, I was a child of maybe about 12 when I decided I had to be a pop star. And at around about that age, I became deeply passionate about the idea of doing music. I started making music in my bedroom, and I was heavily bullied for the music that I put out. Like I was trashed by everyone. And by the age of 21, I was playing shows to 1,400 people, and I'd made that dream come true. After that, I decided that it was time for something else. Actually, at that point, I was about 320 pounds overweight. I was alcoholic. I was struggling with many different things in my life, including sexual repression, some emotional abuse from my childhood, and many different things that I was basically ignoring through alcohol and through the rock star lifestyle I was living when I was touring and doing music.
Right.
And at that point, I had a bit of a breakdown moment, like a serious breakdown moment. I hit a point where I had two suicide attempts.
Damn.
And after those, it was like, okay, well, I need to change things up. I mean, I'm keeping this light and airy, but in all honesty, I wasn't saying, okay, I just need to change things up at that point. I was kind of
Yeah.
like in a very different headspace. But at that point, I kind of thought, you know what? I need to take control back. I need to take ownership and responsibility for where my life is going, because everything's out of control.
Yeah.
Uh, at that point, the only thing that I still had control of was music, and it was the only thing that I liked doing as well. But I thought, you know what? Like, this is the only thing that I have left that I have control over.
Right.
So I need to change it. Because if I don't change anything, I'm going to have a third suicide attempt, and then I might actually, be successful in that attempt. So I have to change something. And the only thing I can change is the one thing I have control over, and that's music.
Okay.
So I decided to leave music, and that made me feel a lot worse in the short term. But long story short, eventually I started working with autistic children, and then I became a radio presenter in national prison radio in the UK, which was a whole weird experience. 33,000 ex-convicts and convicts in the UK know me by voice.
Wow.
It's quite a bizarre thing to be able to claim. Um, and then after that, I thought I need to try something else. So I got into digital marketing, and I worked my way up to a directorial role, and I moved to a different country, from the UK to Canada. And I did all of these different things, and I've worn so many different hats that it hit this tipping point where I was at this director's job. I was making a lot of money, and everything in my life on a purely logical level was perfect. There was literally nothing that I was missing.
Right.
And I was like really frustrated because I realized at that point that even though everything logically was in place and everyone was telling me that I had a great life, I still felt the disconnection from what I'm supposed to be doing. And I still didn't feel in alignment with where I was really going. Now, I was convinced by that point that this would be the time when I would feel like I was connected to myself because I tried so many different things.
Right.
And after, a bit of another breakdown again, because I'm a history of failures that eventually lead to success, which I think is the same with everyone.
Yeah.
But after another breakdown, I quit my director's job, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna work on myself for a little while. And I worked on myself for quite some time, getting rid of the last bits of issues that I had. And after that, I thought, you know what, it's time to give back. I'm going to try and turn this into something. And that's when I started my coaching practice.
Okay.
After, getting certified as a life and health coach, after getting all the paperwork, I started designing my own program. And a couple of years down the line, I've got my coaching business. I just released my debut book, and everything kind of came together. And that feeling that I had for years and years and years of not really knowing what was missing in my life is finally gone. So yeah, I've done a lot of things. If
Yeah.
the,
I mean,
in
good
the
stuff
short
though.
answer.
You know what I mean? I feel like it all kind of shapes you, all the experience. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you know, so as far as the process of kind of getting to where you are now and
Mm.
working on yourself, what did that consist of?
It's
Um,
a very good question. It's a very good question, and it's probably the question I get asked the most, which is like, how? How did you do this, and how can I do it too? Which I think is a really valid question. There's 9 steps in my mind that need to be taken to go from a place where you are being controlled by your external circumstances to you are defining your own experience by changing your own perspective. Because I think what people don't realize is they think that what happens in the world and what happens to them is why they are the way they are. But in reality, what they see from their perspective defines what they see. So,
mhm,
so they're seeing things quite the opposite way. So
yeah,
what I'm able to do with my coaching and how I'm able to reframe my own personal vision of life over and over again is reinterpreting what it is that I have in my mind already as historical information, because our mind is full of memories that are not necessarily authentic or even true anymore.
yeah,
And then shifting that perspective to better serve where I'm going next, as opposed to seeing what I see now. Because I think a lot of people don't have a vision of what's coming for them in the future or what they're materializing or manifesting into their lives at the present. Because people get stuck in this idea that I'll be happy when something happens to me in the future. So I'll
right,
just be unhappy till then.
yeah,
Or they say, I can't ever be happy because of something that happened to me in the past. And I'm sitting here saying, you're already happy for the thing that's happening to you in the future. You're just not allowing yourself to feel it.
that's right.
And the 9 steps needed really in my experience are: one, escaping the traps you have in your mind, because I think a lot of people are caught in very dangerous thinking patterns and cycles that keep perpetuating the same problems over and over and over. The second one is escaping the traps in your health, so your physical health, because this body really is your vessel for traveling around the world, and it can always be, more optimally managed. You can always do a better
Right.
job of looking after it. The third is escaping the traps in your time, because a lot of people don't allocate the time needed to change. A lot of people don't realize that they have the right and the birthright to allocate time to do the things they love. If you did something you enjoy, something you really love for 20 minutes every single day, that's around 122 hours a year. 122 hours. People don't realize that it's 122 hours. They think 22 minutes isn't enough, or 20 minutes isn't enough, or 10 minutes isn't enough.
Right.
So changing the way people think about time, their health, and their mind, that's the first 3 steps. Once we see enough changes in someone's life, and once things start to materialize, and the different results get generated in their experience, which starts to change their perspective, what we then tackle is the self-limiting beliefs that crop up. Because
Okay.
a lot of people don't realize the self-limiting beliefs they have. But when they start to challenge what they have in their experience, they're like, well, hold on, why do I think that about myself when actually I probably could do it differently? So in tackling those self-limiting beliefs, we like to unrepress the emotion. We detach the emotion from the belief, because a belief is really just a thought with
Yeah,
emotion attached to it.
that's
So we
right.
detach the emotion, get rid of that emotion, we unrepress it, we heal it, we let it go, and then that thought can then be changed into whatever you want to think moving forwards.
True.
From that process, which is step 1 to 5,
Yeah.
we find a gem of truth. We find something beautiful. We find a little piece of wisdom that I then ask people to attach to their own identity, to make part of who they are. Because that little piece of wisdom and truth can help everyone who's been where you've been and you've now come out of. And then from the final 3 steps are about reframing our identity. And the process that I teach is as simple as that, from step 1 to 9. And then as soon as we hit the end, the person's always like, well, what do I do next? I'm like, well,
Right.
let's go back to step 1 and we'll fix something else. And it's actually the process that I've used for a decade now to change my life. And I've
Nice.
changed my life in so many different ways.
Right.
So it's a beautiful, beautiful process. It's actually extremely simple. It's just getting into your own mind and your own being is quite difficult. So having someone there to help you do that process is the tricky bit. It's like on
Right.
paper, it's not really that hard, but when you sit down and you try and do it for yourself, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, how do I even start?
Exactly.
Which is where I come in, generally speaking, to help people.
Okay, good. So, as far as you coming up with these steps and realizing you needed to do these for yourself as well as use them for other people, were there any people, tools, books? How did you come to these realizations?
These realizations, I don't pretend to that they're magical or, revealed to me in some mystical way. It's all, I would say, almost common knowledge. Like
Yeah.
the practices that I use and the tools that I use have been learnt from many books. I'd say one of the most impactful books in my life was The Four Agreements, and then the follow-up, The Fifth Agreement.
Yeah.
Those two books, I think, were really transformative for me. And
Those are,
there are a bunch of other books too. I'm someone who loves to read.
yeah, me
Um, but actually, my book's great. Go buy my book. No, but the reality is that the steps and the tools are not, they're not, groundbreaking. I do say in my book they're based on ancient knowledge, science, and common sense. And
Yeah.
in reality, I don't think that there's anything that I necessarily coach that is going to break anyone's, mind or blow their mind.
Yeah.
But the application of this and the order in which I run it in seems to constantly give good results.
Yeah.
So I look at it and I think maybe I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I've just kind of like shaved a little bit off this side so it runs smoother.
Yeah.
Um, but the concepts when it comes to the mind work and the conscious and the subconscious when I run through with clients, that's all science based.
Yeah.
Then the more spiritual concepts, that's more based on an intuitive basis from my own experiences. I'm not a religious person myself, but I've had very strong spiritual experiences that have allowed me to connect with myself in a way that I think I would love other people to do, because the way
Yeah.
that I've connected with myself, I now know that it's impossible for me to not love myself. And I
Right.
actually know that I'm beautiful. And I think that's not a visual thing. Like someone might say your beard sucks, but like what I'm saying here is I've connected with a part of me that is beautiful.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
in doing that, I know that that's part of me too. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm beautiful. At least that bit is.
Right.
And that bit is infinitely loving. So, at least I am infinitely loving at some level.
That's right.
So there's the spiritual component, which is more intuitive. And then there's a lot of research that I did when I was putting this together, when it came down to more the health side, when it comes to macro and micronutrients and all of the sort of more fitness health side, because it's really a process that involves the mind, the body, the component that we don't define by words if we want to keep it open ended. So I say that which is greater than you,
Yeah.
or the infinite potential within you, like whatever it is you want to define it as. It's really a combination of those components.
Right. Okay. Okay, I like that.
Mm.
So your book is called Escape, Breathe, Ignite.
Yes.
Elaborate on the title for me. Tell me how
Right.
you come up with that.
So it's interesting because the title relates very, very closely to the 9 steps that I've mentioned.
Good.
So what I teach and what I coach is actually included in this book. It's the same 9 steps. It's just broken down into a slightly smaller process and using very, very personal stories from my life, like very vulnerable and personal stories from my life. But the escape stage is escaping the mind, the traps in your mind, your health, and your time. The
Okay.
breathe stage is about breathing in and tackling the self-limiting beliefs, unrepressing the emotion, and finding that gem of truth. And the ignite is igniting and celebrating the new identity you create for yourself in the last 3 steps. So for
Okay.
me, it was like, you know what, this is how I'm going to name this, because it lights me up. It makes me feel really passionate, and
Yeah.
I think it's really important to break it down into those steps, because if you're at the start and you're thinking about hitting that final step, you're missing a lot of the work that needs to be done in the middle. And the secret is that the work, when you start working on it, is enjoyable itself,
Definitely.
which I think a lot of clients don't expect. But then they realize that they're actually having a really good time whilst tackling all of these issues, because they feel empowered,
Yeah.
feel really empowered from doing the process. So yeah,
Okay.
that's where the name comes from.
I love it. I love it. Tell me, what does love mean to you?
It's a good question. I would say that when I was suicidal, love meant what Hollywood told me it meant,
Okay.
and I didn't really understand what it was. Um, in the journey back, when I empowered myself and when I started to find the parts of me that I didn't know existed, I have had a few key experiences that have taught me what love is in a different sense.
Okay.
For me, what love is the sensation you have when everything is broken and you feel like every single component of you is not working, and you're crying and you know you're okay, even
Okay.
though there's no one else there.
Right.
That's what love is. And there's one particular example I can think of when I was having one of my breakdowns. I was literally lying in the fetal position on the floor, sobbing like a baby, like just like wow, wow, like full on breaking down. And the way that I describe it is I felt that every part of me was being stripped away. And having spoken to a lot of people about this, people talk about it as ego death or something like that. But I don't really put those words to it. For me, it was just a really powerful experience. And what was interesting is for a split second when I was there on the floor crying and feeling everything being stripped away, just a blink of an eye, I was looking down at myself going through the experience. And in that one split second, I felt so much love, just so much empowerment, so much strength, and so much love just absolutely everywhere around me, encasing me, that when I returned back into myself, my life was never the same again. It was a completely different life from that day on. So
Right.
that's why I talk to people about having breakdowns as a good thing. I'm like, your breakdown almost always leads to a massive breakthrough. But
Yeah.
when people talk about love, for me, it's that 1 inch, that 1 second when I experience that infinite something. To me, there's nothing greater than that. And if there's nothing greater than it, that's what I call love.
Okay. Cool. 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 So, in what areas do you feel like we can improve as a human race?
This, that we could talk about for hours and hours and hours. I think that our societies are functioning in the best possible way they can based on what we've achieved so far as a human race. I don't think we're doing a terrible job. I think a lot of people think we're doing a terrible job. I think we're doing our best. All right.
Okay.
We're doing our best, but it's just not very good.
Yeah.
Ways that we can improve our societies. Number one, instead of coming from a place of power and control, if society could find a way to be rooted in empathy and compassion, then we would have a
Yeah.
much better time. We would get along a lot better. And
True.
the concept of having leadership, for example, that leads with empathy as opposed to control, would completely reshift the way the world works. And one of the key ways that the world would change, which is one that's quite dear to my heart, is we would stop stripping and destroying the resources that we have on this planet. We would stop literally destroying the planet Earth.
Yeah.
And we would find a way to be in communion and harmony with the whole of existence and the whole of creation, as opposed to being a plague that is literally ransacking it. I think empathy and compassion, if they can be integrated into the way that we run our societies, then we will have a chance of making it through as a human race. At this point and the way we're going, I don't think we can live in this way much longer.
Yeah.
And from a historical standpoint, as soon as things get difficult, we start to kill each other.
Right.
So to me, it's like things kind of have to shift, and they have to shift soon. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a place where we might just end up completely destroying ourselves, which
Yeah.
for the long term of the planet might not actually be a bad thing.
Right.
So realistically speaking, we're a plague, but we're doing our best, but we're trying to do better. And I don't pretend that it's an easy process to, introduce empathy and compassion and these necessary components into our societal structure. But I do think we all have a duty and a birthright to bring that into our own worlds. And
Definitely.
as we do that, our perspectives shift. And as our perspectives shift, our connected perspective starts to shift. And
Definitely.
eventually our consciousness starts to raise. And eventually, with time, society has a chance of changing.
Okay, cool. Good stuff. I know that you're a big traveler, so
I love travel.
yeah, I want you to tell me, just describe like the freedom and of escaping the rat race and like what do you learn from traveling and just tell me about it.
Tell me about travel. That's a good. Again, hours and hours later, we're still talking. No, but travel's had I've had a very personal experience of the open road on my travels, which I think is something that when people say I travel a lot, I ask them how. Not in the sense of how they do it, but more how they do it. Do they go to a five-star resort, or do they go and climb a mountain? Because I find that the people that I resonate with most are the ones that kind of do things the more natural way,
Right.
like go for the mountains as opposed for the casinos. If I go to Vegas, I want to go and see the mountains. I don't want to go in the casino. But in 2018, I actually did a 17 country world trip.
Nice.
While I was doing this, I was still, running my coaching business, and that was a really special thing for me to be able to continue my work whilst traveling was
Yeah.
something that I'd always wanted to do. I'd had the dream of being a digital nomad for a long time, and I was finally doing it. But I think what traveling does, in the simplest terms, is it takes you out of your own bubble, and it makes you realize that there's so much more to the world than what you see on a day-to-day basis. Because ultimately, everything that you experience is your perspective, right?
Yeah,
So if your perspective stays in the same place all the time, your world is small. If your perspective moves around a bit, your world is bigger. I
definitely.
now know what it's like to be in a slum in India. And because I know what it's like to be in a slum in India, I will never look at tap water in my tap in the same way ever again.
Yeah.
I've been to the beautiful nature in New Zealand and to the beautiful nature in Australia. And I come back here and I think it's so important that we look after our planet because those places will not be sustained in the same way that they are.
Yeah.
Bringing yourself out of your comfort zone, going on a road trip across New Zealand in a camper van was one of the highlights of my trip. Being away from Wi-Fi and the internet for a while and just being connected with very little other than what's immediately around you. Suddenly you pay a lot more attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
Teaches you a lot about being present and teaches you a lot about being in the moment. And the other thing that I find really, really beautiful about traveling is what you end up finding out there on the open road is nothing really new. It's just other parts of yourself that you didn't realize you had.
Okay.
And you're almost like upgrading yourself. And to me, that's kind of the process that I coach people through. It's the process that I think a lot of people can find traveling as well. Really, traveling just allows you to see something new, changes your perspective, allows you to find different parts of yourself so that when you come back, you hopefully have a healthier perspective of the world. I guess unless you go somewhere and something terrible happens, but we all hope
Yeah.
that that won't happen to us.
Right. That's inspiring. I can't wait till I can travel like that.
I think you
Um,
should. Where would you go? Where would you go if you
man,
traveled?
there's so many places, honestly. I kind of like I almost don't even care. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, I just
yeah.
want I want to see everything. I want to see a
Right.
little bit of, I'm curious. I love seeing new stuff and new
Yeah,
people and
yeah,
experiences, so but there's a lot of places I want to go.
totally. And I
Yeah.
think that the one thing that people say that is always the block between their aspiration and their dream to travel and being the person who actually travels is the financial component.
Right.
But being someone who has, had lots of money in my life and had no money in my life, and I've kind of zigzagged between the two over the years, I can say that it is really fundamentally possible to travel with very little money if
Right.
you're willing to put yourself out there. And the putting yourself out there element's the bit that scares people the most. But if you can land in a country like I did in Peru, I landed in an airport in a place called Cusco, which is a little while from Machu Picchu. I was going to plan to make the journey to Machu Picchu. I landed at 5 in the morning. I had no idea of where I was going. I didn't really have any plan of where I was going to stay. And I was met by a collection of rabid dogs, just like in town. And the airport didn't even have like a checkout or anything. This was a while ago. But like I
Wow.
just got off the plane and they were like, "You're here." So I kind of got out and I was like, okay, this is kind of intimidating. We're in Peru. I don't really speak much of the language. I don't really know much about the culture. It's not the most affluent city I've ever been in, and there's a bunch of rabid dogs.
Yeah.
If you can find yourself in a place where you're comfortable enough to put yourself out there in that way, something always materializes. Something
Okay.
always happens. It's almost like you're testing the universe and saying, "Come through for me," and the universe will always come through for you.
Right.
Always. In this case, I found this tiny little hostel that actually was super cheap, and the lady spoke very broken English, and I was not very good in my communication either.
Yeah.
And she gave me this really lovely room and some coca tea for the altitude sickness. And I sat there drinking my coca tea like an hour ago. I didn't even know what I was doing. Now I have somewhere to stay, and
Yeah.
I'm be able to go and see Machu Picchu. So like, if you're willing to take the risks to take a really nasty time flight, like, one of those flights that's in the worst possible time, and then you have to make four connections, and then you land there and you have nowhere to stay. If you're willing to do that, the world is your oyster. But I
Yeah.
think the people are intimidated by the idea of really putting yourself out there. But because it's trust. You're
Yeah.
ultimately taking a small leap of faith.
Right.
But without taking any leaps of faith in life, you get nowhere.
That's right. I mean, fear is ultimately like what stops everybody from anything, you know? And but you know, everyone knows the quote like everything you want is on the other side of fear, you know?
It's
So
right behind it. It's
yeah.
right behind it. It truly is. And the question I ask myself if I'm ever comfortable is, why am I not scared? Because
Yeah.
if I'm comfortable at any point, it means that I've stopped pushing. And if
Right.
I've stopped pushing, then I'm not going where I want to go. And actually, I've become much better at finding myself peaceful within discomfort
Yeah.
in the last year, because the travels that I did in 2018 really reshaped my understanding of myself, and I came back with a much more reserved and peaceful and calm vision of myself and the way I wanted to take my life moving forwards. And I think that, again, getting out on the open road, experiencing new things, having someone put a different context on your life.
Yeah.
Another great example from Peru, because I'm back there right now in my head. I
Yeah.
went walking through one of the sort of slum areas in Peru. These very, very, very sort of like shacks and very poor people living in squalid conditions, not very good conditions at all. And I came across this lady who had this beautiful smile. So I was smiling at her, and we couldn't really communicate. But she gestured for me to come in her house. She was like, "Come in my house." And I call it a house. It was a blue door that looked like kind of like a house door, and
Right.
then it was a corrugated iron sort of slanted, not even a shed or a shack. It was just like a slanted corrugated iron thing like this. So they'd obviously found the door somewhere that was a beautiful door, and they'd put it on the corrugated iron.
Yeah.
And she was welcoming me in, and she was smiling, and she seemed so proud to show me her house. She seemed so excited to show this tourist into her home and to share her home with her. She was offering me a drink, like she was doing all of these things. And at that time, I was quite wealthy in the sense that I was working in my high flying job. And
Right.
I had been stuck on the notion that I was poor because I grew up in a very, very poor family. We
Mm.
had really nothing. And in my mind, I was still poor, even though I wasn't. And
Right.
that experience with the lady there just completely changed the context of my life. I
Yeah.
looked at her and I said, one, she's happy.
Yeah.
Two, she's more welcoming than I am of other people. And
Right.
three, she's much kinder than I am. And she's giving me more, even though she has less.
Yeah.
Now, I went to Peru maybe 6 or 7 years ago now. That's the last 6 or 7 years that I've completely reframed the way I think about myself when it comes to finances.
Yeah. Yeah.
Contextually now, as long as I'm not living on the streets, I'm rich. And if
Right.
I'm living on the streets, I'm still fine. Like it's the context that travel gives you that I think really changes your life. You realize just how limited your perspective is, and when you do, you realize just how much better you could be at loving other people and yourself.
Right. I love that. So, according to you, peace is the secret sauce to success.
It absolutely is.
So, elaborate a little bit on that for me.
The reason that my mantra is peace is the secret source of success is as simple as this. I have achieved a lot in my life. People come to me and they say, "You're a winner. You're a winner because you wanted to be a pop star and you had a chance to be, right? You were playing to 1,400 people. You were having the lifestyle, and then you said, 'I don't want to be a pop star. I want to do something different.' And you became the star child in media, the spoke about young guy who was like really up and coming, and then you became the director of this thing, and you made loads of money and lived in the fanciest building in Toronto downtown. Like you're a winner. Like you really have won a lot in your life." And I always thought that I was someone who, if I set my mind to something and achieved it, that I was capable of doing it. And honestly, I still believe that. I think everyone's capable of anything. If you have a dream in your mind, it's because you're capable of achieving it. You don't
Right.
have dreams that are incapable, things that you're incapable of achieving. You might have like wishes or, imagination and creative ideas that say, I wish I was like this. That's kind of different. But a dream is something that really comes and strikes you in the heart.
Yeah.
And what I learned from achieving financial goals, from achieving career goals, from achieving creative goals is every single time I would hit that goal, I would feel good for about 3 minutes and then I'd feel terrible again because I'd suddenly have another arbitrary goal that was just that little bit higher. So if I played a show to 1,400 people, I'd say, yeah, well, that's good, but I need to play a show to 10,000. Then I
Right.
play a show to 10,000. I'm like, yeah, but that's good, but I'm not Lady Gaga. I mean, fuck. So
Right.
like, it's that kind of constant churn of push, 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 push. It's the hustle mentality.
Yeah.
Now, what I came to realize with time is if I'm going to be on this perpetual cycle, if I'm going to be perpetually growing, then I cannot be miserable the entire time because that's what the rest of my life is going to be.
Right.
And if achieving what I want to achieve is only going to give me more things to strive for, then I can't delay my joy till I achieve those things. Otherwise, I'm going to have about 3 seconds of joy here and here and here, and then I'm dead.
Yeah.
9 seconds of joy in your entire life, and the rest is struggle.
Right.
And I realized how unhealthy it is for someone to aspire to all of these things and not enjoy the process. So
True.
that's when I knuckled down and I was like, well, hold on. I've got to find a way to make the process enjoyable. I need to know how I can make the hustle pleasurable. I need to know how I can really love every single moment of my life.
Yeah.
And that's where I started to dig. And eventually, when I got to the bottom of that digging process, I realized that our perspective is everything. So
Yeah.
if I can foster a sense of peace within my perspective, if I can center myself in this beautiful, peaceful space, then everything in my life is enjoyable.
Yeah.
And as everything in my life is enjoyable, so is the hard work I'm doing, so is the hustle, so is the grind. And because I'm enjoying those things, I'm doing them twice as well. I'm getting twice as many results. I'm push, 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 push. I work with a lot of like startups and entrepreneurs and people who are on the rise, and they've hit this wall where they say, I can't work any harder. I say, yeah, but you can work with peace. And if you're working with peace, you're going to get huge, huge gains. Like I've seen people go from, 5 figures to 6 figures income for their businesses, 6 figures to 7 figures. Like people don't realize that the key component to success in any career or any aspiration of yours is peace.
True.
Although they still look at the interviews with Olympic gold medalists, with celebrities and people who've worked their way all the way to the top, and they still hear those people say, I always knew I'd get here.
Yeah.
You can't say, I always knew I'd get here unless you were at peace with the idea of getting there.
Yeah.
Every person our society celebrates as being a winner who's achieved something within their respective field was at peace with the idea that they were going to achieve it.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
peace is definitely the secret sauce to success. Because if you can find peace within what you're doing, whatever it is, you can definitely make it successful.
Definitely. Okay, cool, Frankie. Well, I think that's all the questions I have for you today. And I'm just so glad I got to chat with you. It was a good one,
Thanks
definitely.
so much. No, it's always good to chat. I love being grilled on my perspective, and
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much.